The next term which I'd like to share with you is peer teaching. Yes, peer teaching. This is something we tend to underestimate, perhaps, or some of us love it, but there's no time for it. And, you know, especially at the beginning, where students do this for the first couple of times, it might be time consuming. But remember, I have hope, excuse me, that every time students do this sort of peer teaching, they get better at it all the time. Their self-confidence improves. They know how to move. They know how to raise the level of their voices, all these things. So, peer teaching is a must for many reasons. Students can often explain things amongst themselves better than actually we can. Have you ever had sometimes an example where you're sitting there trying to explain an example, writing on the board in detail, underlining, circling, highlighting, acting like a clown in front of your class, but one or two students may still have difficulty in understanding. So at this point, what you can do when you still see blank faces is to ask another student, which you know has understood, to explain it in their own words. This explanation given by a student to explain to other students is often done at their level, so students are more likely to understand and often understand their explanation, the students' explanation, better than ours sometimes, which is more complicated. Peer teaching, you can start off with, of course, a whole teacher and class, or you can start off peer teaching with small groups, okay? So choose a student from each group to show other students an activity or something that you're working on. Keep in mind that peer teaching does involve a lot of preparation on your behalf. So be prepared to do some preparation when it comes to peer teaching. The next point then is debates. This is one of my favorite. I really like debates. This is where you get to see your students' true colors come out live. Now you're probably thinking debates, yeah, okay. One, debates are really difficult. And secondly, how on earth do you set up a debate? Yes, I agree with you. Debates are difficult, and I would not use debates for a very young class. But as your students get older, you can use debates, and I'm going to show you how you can use a debate in your lesson. First of all, excuse me, let me just drink some water. Excuse me. First of all, what we need to do is to find a suitable topic. When you set up a debate, you're not going to use a topic that students do not know much about. You must choose that topic wisely. So perhaps students have done a topic, for example, on the environment, okay? You've talked about this whole module, which is about saving the environment. You've talked about the downside of what it does to the environment. You've talked about recycling. You've talked about how we can help as people or how we can help as citizens. Students are now familiar with words, vocabulary, lexes that are used to describe environment. Students are now familiar with structures which are used to describe the environment. So, first of all, The topic has to be known by the students. The second step is to have a sentence which is very, very debatable. For example, China can control the weather. This is a good thing. Now, what do I mean by controlling the weather? I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's becoming more popular. I read about it on the internet quite a while back. It's a process, a real process. Okay, I'm not making this up. It's a real process called cloud seeing. And this cloud seeing is used to control the rain. This happens as a result of dispersing chemicals into the air. Now, I would then get students to go onto the net and surf the net and learn about cloud seeing, okay? Learn about how the Chinese actually get to control the weather. Now, the next step is you divide your classroom into two. Team A, where they agree with this term. Whether they agree personally with this term is irrelevant, okay? This is something that you have to explain to your students. Doesn't matter if they agree really or if they disagree with this term. In a debate, they have to support the group that they are in. So all of Team A has to support, yes, I agree with this statement. Team B, the rest of the group, no, does not agree with this statement. So immediately you have two teams which have opposing views. Now, in groups, they can research information about this and they can make their own points, or you can give them more guided points that you want them to focus on. If it's a week or you're doing this for a first time, it might be a good idea to give them some guidance. What do I mean by guidance? I mean, for example, Team A, here are some points that you can be thinking about. Whether cloud seeing stops floodings, whether cloud seeing is perfect weather, means perfect weather for important days like the Olympics, and whether cloud seeing will help climate change. Whereas the opposing view, you give them opposing, of course, ideas. We shouldn't be using cloud seeing because it could be dangerous, because it's not a natural, something natural by the environment, so it will have bad effects. And thirdly, because it's not been scientifically proven, perhaps, that it works well. So, after giving them this guidance from your students, then your students are ready to debate, okay? Get them in two opposing teams, give them a time limit. For example, each person that will talk will be given roughly a minute, no more. Make sure you have a stopwatch. And this debate is also a great way for students to assess or evaluate their other students as well. So you could be doing something simultaneously. Moving on now, after debates, I'd like to talk a little bit about short demonstrations followed by class discussion. Now, what do I mean by short demonstrations? Short demonstrations can be anything in the way of making something. It could be growing something. I know that a lot of us use seeds in the first grades to get students to see how perhaps a tomato grows. How to do an experiment, or a short demonstration of how to get from place to place. Remember, these demonstrations are a good idea if you can tie them in with your lesson. So for example, if I have a lesson, for example, of exploring London, we can have a short demonstration of how students would move, in which direction, which line they would need to take if they were in London and they were using the metro, or some of us call it the subway or the underground, whatever.